Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
Welcome to the show. It is Duffin and Castor ready to talk more around cellular medicine. And today I'm super excited. This is one of my favorite areas to discuss. It is cognitive peptides and nootropics. And I think that there's some vast kind of misunderstanding around some of the products and what they are in this period, where a lot of people are thinking these things are similar to, a lot of, supplements or drugs that we're familiar with on the market that enhance more stimulant based. So let's start with Anthony. Maybe I'll start with an introduction, and then maybe we can go back and forth. We've got a list of peptides that we're going to discuss today, so just kind of go back and forth on that. Does that sound like a decent approach?
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Excellent. So in recent years, cognitive peptides and nootropics have gained immense popularity for their ability to enhance mental performance, support brain health, and provide neuroprotection. These compounds have been wildly sought after by professionals, students, and individuals looking to boost their memory and focus, learning, and overall cognitive function. Understanding the difference between these two categories, peptides and nootropics, is crucial for appreciating the unique roles in brain enhancement. So what are peptides and nootropics? Peptides, well, I hope that you're familiar with that based on listening to this podcast to date, but are short chain of amino acids acting as single molecules in the body. And when it comes to cognitive function, cognitive peptides influence the brain's health by promoting neurogenesis. That's the growth of new neurons. So the word I like to use for that is neurotrophic, which we're going to get, which is different than nootropic. So what they do is they enhance synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections, and protecting neurons from damage. So many of these peptides, like C Max, Cerebralysin, Dihexa, are designed to improve memory, learning, and recovery from brain injuries and neurodegenerative diseases. Now, nootropics, this term refers to substances that enhance cognitive performance with minimal side effects. So nootropics can be synthetic, like Modafinil, pyricytime, NewPEPT, or natural, like caffeine or ginkgo biloba, and they primarily improve focus, memory, and mental clarity. The nootropics are often used to increase mental stamina, alertness, and productivity, especially during long periods of cognitive effort. The roles that these peptides and nootropics on cognitive function, both of them optimize different aspects of brain function, often through various mechanisms such as modulating neurotransmitter activity, increasing blood flow to the brain, and promoting the growth of new neurons. So peptides like Cerebralysin, Synapsin, RG3 enhance neuroplasticity and synapses formulation, improving the brain's ability to adapt, learn, and recover from damage, where the nootropics, such as Modafinil and pyricytime, primarily increase neurotransmitter activity like dopamine, acetylcholine, which we've talked about in, I think, the last podcast quite a bit, and orexin, which we have not, but we're going to dive into today to boost focus, wakefulness, and cognitive endurance. So understand, nootropics are short-term effect. The peptides and the neurotrophic compounds have a longer lasting impact on the brain itself and actually improving it. So you think about, let's think about like caffeine and training. If you take some caffeine, typically you can train, you can run a little longer, right? But it's not going to add any muscle mass, right? So that would be the difference. You got to think about your neurotrophic is actually helping build that muscle mass. It may not help as much in the short term as a nootropic that is, that's going to have that immediate impact. Like caffeine's going to have an immediate impact on like your running distance or sensation of fatigue, right? But it is not going to help you with the long term of that. Do you want to cover the overview of the peptides we're going to talk about today, Anthony?
Sure. We've got a number that we're going to be covering today. Some of them are going to be peptides, and some of them are considered small molecules, or like the synapsins. It's a ginsenoside, so it comes from a type of ginseng. And each of them kind of has their own benefits and everything. I guess building off of what Chris said, when we think about why do we take these things and what are the benefits we're going to get from them, some of them are going to be neurotransmitter modulators. Some of them are going to protect, so the neuroprotection. They're going to prevent damage in brain cells by reducing like oxidative stress, inflammation, excitotoxicity. Some of them actually create like synaptogenesis, neuroplasticity, and some of them work as a growth factor. So like brain-derived neurotropic factor, and the Dihexa we'll talk about is a hepatocyte growth factor, hepata like liver, and some of them protect that blood-brain barrier permeability. So there's really, it's going to come together as we're going through these peptides, and this is why it's so exciting, I think, that it's not like there's one that's best, or just do this one and your brain's going to be perfect. You really start to see how, depending on what you want to address in terms of getting optimal brain function, efficient recall, and all the things that we want our brain to be able to do, executive function, there might be one or there might be a combination, and you can kind of use these cyclically. And in fact, there's even some cool stuff we'll cover about some of these being used for, like, if we're in a neural phase of training, things that can improve like rate coding and even local neural intervention into the muscle tissue. So yeah, I can't wait to unpack this.
Excellent. So before we start diving into the first in the list, why are these compounds gaining attention? Well, there's been growing interest in peptides and nootropics for their unique ability to enhance cognitive function while providing neuroprotection. Here are some of the reasons they're gaining attention in regards to, so those would be cognitive enhancement, neuroprotection, and also just the growth in the scientific support and literature. So people on the cognitive side, people are increasingly looking for safe ways to improve focus, memory, and learning. Nootropics like Modafinil and NewPEPT offer these benefits without the harsh side effects associated with traditional stimulants like caffeines and amphetamines. And that may surprise you when I mention Modafinil, if people are familiar with that, because we'll dive deeper into it. But yeah, it is actually less harsh than caffeine. Neuroprotection. Peptides like Cerebralysin and C Max not only boost cognitive function, but provide long-term neuroprotection, making them attractive to individuals looking to prevent cognitive decline and support recovery from brain injuries. And I have used those with clients specifically with traumatic brain injuries. Scientific support. So the research into these compounds shows promising results in treating neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, enhancing their reputation as beneficial for healthy individuals facing cognitive challenges as well. I guess the last thing I didn't mention is like improving productivity. So, professionals, Castor and Duffin, we use these. Students and creatives need to sustain high levels of productivity and focus. These compounds offer a way to optimize mental performance, especially during periods of cognitive demand. Anything else that you want to add there, Anthony?
No, I think that's really good overview. The figure maybe I'll, if you want, to be happy to unpack Cerebralysin a little bit, the one we're starting with. And reason this one's kind of the one that we're starting with, it's really, if you had to pick just one, and a minute ago I said, there's not one, but this one's really going to cover a lot of bases. And when you think about Cerebralysin, it'll be small changes in amino acids, just like any peptide. And there's free-form amino acids. and it's derived from pig's brain. So right there, probably doesn't sound too appetizing.
It doesn't
But
smell very appetizing either, if you have any experience with
no,
it.
and
It
it kind of an interesting thing with regards to biology is we're pretty similar to pigs, and my fiance would say I'm extremely similar to a pig if you've ever seen me at a dinner table. But um, when you think about like Armour thyroid that people take for their thyroid, one of the reasons is it's close enough to be recognized as thyroid in our body, but it's different enough that if you're producing antibodies to thyroid, it's not gonna attack it. So cerebralysin coming from a pig's brain kind of makes sense when we think about it in that context. And the collection of proteins that you get with cerebralysin, they basically mimic the natural proteins that's going to be in our brain, and especially those that play a role in like protecting and repairing the neurons and brain cells. So if you think of it like this, if you want to imagine your brain as like a complex city with roads, buildings, communication networks, and then over time, just like in our city, these things are going to get damaged. There's going to be potholes in the roads and wires with short circuiting and buildings falling apart. And cerebralysin is just like a team of construction workers and engineers and electricians that are going to come in and repair that city. And instead of fixing just the physical damage, it helps your brain repair and even protect the neurons and synapses, because we don't want to just repair to where we were. We want to prepare ourselves that, as cars get heavier and weather gets worse, city's going to stand up. So that's like when we kind of think about the general overview. And when we think about kind of the two ways that it's working, like the neuroprotection aspect, what's going to happen is the neurons, which are the cells in your brain, they're like these fragile machines that can get damaged due to factors like aging or lack of oxygen or disease. Any of those things are going to essentially provide an insult to those neurons. And where cerebralysin is extremely valuable is it's going to help by protecting these cells from dying prematurely. So it's almost like playing Mario Brothers and getting a charge up, or giving a car an oil change and a tune up. It makes those neurons less likely to break down under stress. And by doing that, essentially these good neurons that we've been building up and that are learning patterns and really helping us our whole life, it's like they get a second wind. And then when we think about the neurotropic support that cerebralysin provides, acts kind of like a growth booster. And there's certain proteins in cerebralysin that are really similar to what we would call neurotrophic factors. And these are basically just proteins that help brain cells grow, repair themselves, and create new connections and synapses. And it's just like going back to that city analogy, it's just like adding a new infrastructure to our brain city and helping those neurons connect more efficiently. And that's going to potentially improve cognitive functions like memory and learning and all these things we really want to kind of build up. And for a little bit more technical look, what's happening actually is there's NGF, and that stands for nerve growth factor mimicry. And that's one of the key parts of how cerebralysin works. It basically mimics these naturally occurring molecules like NGF, the nerve growth factor, and the BDNF, which is the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And these molecules, easy way to think about them, it's just like fertilizer for your neurons. So it's going to help them grow and survive. And it's like providing water and sunlight to a plant. Without these, the plant or neuron would end up just kind of dying. And also helps with prevention of apoptosis. Apoptosis being cell death, as we've talked about in a couple episodes now. When the neurons are under threat from like toxins, stress, disease, those kind of things, it triggers apoptosis or programmed cell death. And it's kind of like a ejector seat in a car if you're about to hit a wall. And cerebralysin appears to inhibit this process, and it works. It's a lot like if you were thinking about like installing a backup power generator in the city to prevent blackouts. if there was going to be like electric failure or something. And then the other thing it does in terms of like its mechanism of action is it reduces neuroinflammation. So that's why it's so valuable after something like a TBI. In certain like conditions, Alzheimer's, stroke, parts of the brain become inflamed because of that ischemic event. That's going to cause more damage. Cerebralysin is able to reduce the inflammation, and it's just kind of like putting out fires in parts of a city before they spread.
It's used quite frequently after in recovery from ischemic strokes, where the brain has been deprived of blood and oxygen. So that's a pretty common use of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The tremendous for any type of stroke. They use it in Alzheimer's, and it looks like as Alzheimer's things go, reasonably good results, and really good for recovering from a stroke. And then it's also like I've used it if I'm doing what I would call a neural hypertrophy phase of training, or something where I'm moving really heavy weights, and one of the things that contribute to that is going to be like rate coding and neural intervention to the tissue. I'll do site-specific injections intramuscularly with the Cerebralysin because of the synaptogenesis, and improves nervous supply to the muscle tissue.
Really interesting. I've been wondering about that. So I would agree that Cerebralysin would be top of my list as well. When we're speaking of traumatic brain injuries, my nephew had a unfortunate car accident, thrown 100 feet from his vehicle, airlifted to the hospital. They weren't sure he was going to survive. And, over the course of the next several months, had 5 brain surgeries. And the first day that he felt his feet was the day that he was administered Cerebralysin. And I've had some great experiences for myself post, my heavy steroid use days, when I use some, toxic ones such as tren, which is heavily neurodegenerative. So that was really my choice in why I started getting into Cerebralysin, was to recover from both the significant amount of stress induced on my body as well as the neurodegenerative compounds. And man, you have such a nice calming effect following administration, in the periods following that. It's really great. And I've noticed also the carryover into mood as it relates to anxiety, kind of depression, those things. And I know I'm not the only one that has reported that. So, it's a really amazing compound. And that's one of the things that I was wondering about, to get back to where I butted in here, was the impact. I'm like, man, I wish I, during some of my really heavy periods of training, had the opportunity to play with Cerebralysin, with the impact on nervous system and CNS fatigue. And my theory is, like, I think that it could have a pretty substantial impact on high neural demand, like strength training, not muscle mass, right? Not bodybuilding prep, but like, those significant. And that's been something I'd be interested in feedback on.
Yeah, it's I've used it, like, if you bro speak here, if you got a muscle and you can't feel it and make that kind of mind muscle connection, a lot of times that's going to come down to the way the nerves are transmitting signals. So in kind of a lagging muscle group like that, a lot of value. And then definitely for those heavier phases of training, just in terms of the repair. Another really good, I think, underrated application for it is if you got a surgery coming up where they're going to be using anesthesia. Remember, when they use that anesthesia, basically you're not getting oxygen to the brain, and people forget about that. But 5 days prior to surgery, all the way through, I go 14 days after, so 19 days total. I would say do the Cerebralysin and I'm pretty aggressive with the dosage, so I'd use 10 milliliters, and just to protect against the anesthesia and the negative effects that come with it.
I did that. So I did that with my last surgery, and man, it was amazing. The how much better I came out of that surgery period and being under like that play. I've been through a few surgeries, and I know how fast I can recover using peptides. I had zero concern about that I'm going to be back in no time. I'm like, what can I do to minimize the impact? And so I use a few of the different compounds that we're going to talk about today, but primary one being Cerebralysin. So when we're talking about it being kind of number one on the list, it is the oldest of all of these, widely researched. So it was developed in 1948, patented in 1954. So those patents are way out. So that's why most people don't hear about it. But if you expose a physician to it and they do the research, they'll be usually pretty impressed. And that was with my nephew, and they're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do this. I'm surprised I've never heard of this before. So it's rather interesting, but that's because it's been around for a long time and there's no money in it. And the research has been done, so the safety profile is really high. I mean, they've done research in young children. That's when we think about some of these issues, that's where they're applying that in, like I said, some stroke TBI type things with kids. So it's the safety profile is pretty substantial. One of the things that I recommend, and I don't know if you agree with this, Anthony, but is usually, you talked about site specific for the neural activity as it relates to movement, muscle. When it comes to the neurotrophic effects, usually I try to administer this into my traps. I'm trying to go as close to my brain as I can.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's I think kind of getting back to the whole discussion of pharmacokinetics, sort of the closer to the area you can get it, the better off you're going to be. The one cool thing too about the Cerebralysin is with regards to the blood-brain barrier, because these chains of proteins, the peptides in there are so small, it's just a collection of a lot of small peptides. It'll cross that blood-brain barrier. So exactly as Chris said, if you get it even a little bit closer to the brain, if the brain's your target, and then it's got that ability to cross that blood-brain barrier, it's really going to be pretty effective. And that's where some of these things, that look good on paper fall short, that we've got that blood-brain barrier, and if things can't get through there, not really going to do what they're supposed to do in the brain.
Yeah, and that's one of the ones. There's sometimes you take compounds or supplements. You're like, is it really doing something? And I feel with Cerebralysin, you definitely know. Now, sometimes you experience, I call it kind of a brain fog or fatigue the day following. And you just think about it just like after a heavy workout, it feels like the same way with your muscles. It's like, man, my brain is like, it's recovering, it's growing right now. And you can fight. So I rarely ever administer like the night before I've got like intense meetings or things like that. I would actually space it out like on a Saturday night or something of that nature where I've got time to kind of chill the next day. But that's been with a lot of my 5 and ml doses. Recently, I've been doing 20 and actually wake up feeling amazing, which I was surprised. I thought I'd be more kind of lethargic, but I actually feel much more ready to hit the road than before, which is not the feeling that I get the day following Cerebralysin normally. Now,
yeah, it's I think that you got a couple different methods of administration. You can do like the intramuscular, or you can do like an IV. And IV, I think, is going to be first choice if that's available, in terms of just how fast it's going to get in your system, be metabolized and everything. But intramuscular, if you're using it for training purposes, in my opinion, that might actually be the better way to go. And you can even do a sub-Q with it. So there's some different options there. Any of those are going to be effective, but to build on what Chris said about the brain fog, doing an IV generally that's going to metabolize a little bit faster than those other two options. So that's kind of something to think about too.
Yep. Let's dive into the world of optimizing your overall health. With pushing my physical limits, I encountered significant reductions in my health, and I reached out to Merrick Health as the premier telehealth service. I loved their personalized health coaching from the comfort of my home. They empower you with the choice of self-service diagnostic labs, or what I chose, the guided optimization with expert interpretations of blood work, health coaching, and with medications delivered to my door. Merrick Health is your partner in optimizing your health. Listeners can seize a fantastic 10% discount off their first blood work with code RESILIENCE at merrickhealth.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off. So I know Limitless Nootropics has it. I'm not sure if Amino does. I've always gotten Cerebralysin from, because it wasn't available on some of these other sites before, Cosmic Nootropics. So if anybody ever wants to get any, you can get a discount if you use the code ENDLESS. Like Endless Evolution, you can get a discount code there. But if it's on Amino or Limitless, you can use our codes that you can find on usually my link tree or on our community forum for anybody that's interested. We've spent quite a bit of time on Cerebralysin. Should we just jump into the next one?
Sure.
All right.
Just to build on what you said about the sourcing, I've always gone through Cosmic Nootropic. I know Limitless is pretty good. I don't know if Amino has it yet. One thing I'll say is Cerebralysin is one of the most counterfeited things out there. So you do want to really make sure you're getting it from a good source. And I know Cosmic imports.
Cosmic's importing from the manufacturers, and that because it's produced not in the States or China. It's over where it's. One of the Eastern European countries. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Cosmic does imports of a lot of that stuff that's available in those areas.
Yeah.
Which is why I use that as well. So that's the recommended source for coming, I think, from both of us. So
yeah, definitely.
You're doing a great job of covering the. I love your analogies and the way you do that. Do you want to jump into Cortexin?
Sure. Thank you. So Cortexin, it's going to be pretty similar in terms of when we think about Cortexin versus Cerebralysin. When we kind of think about, what's Cortexin doing that Cerebralysin isn't doing, we can explore everything from like the some of the cellular pathways to some of its unique aspects. Where it really seems to shine, in my opinion, is it's great for combating oxidative stress and excitotoxicity. And when we think about oxidative stress, to use an analogy, just think about it like wrecking balls would be a good analogy, I guess. And these free radicals are like these tiny wrecking balls inside your cells, and they're reactive because they have unpaired electrons, which means they'll interact with almost anything to stabilize themselves. So if you think about these little electrons being like little magnets that can connect, anytime there's something they can attach to, boom, they want to do that. And when these free radicals attack the components of the cell, like cell membrane, because they're bouncing around like ping pong balls, or mitochondria that we talked about last week, which is important for generating energy for the cell, they're going to cause that damage that accumulates over time. And in neurons, that oxidative stress leads to membrane damage. So it's going to break down like the membranes of the neurons, and that leads to cell death, mitochondrial dysfunction we talked about, and then also even damages like the DNA. So for Cortexin, when we think about like how's this help, it works in the brain partially like as an antioxidant, as Chris explained last week when we touched briefly on Modafinil, how it's got antioxidant properties in the brain. And this neutralizes those free radicals before they can be that wrecking ball bouncing around, knocking out the cell walls and mitochondria and all that stuff. And by reducing this oxidative stress and protecting the neurons, um, it's going to be beneficial for things like stroke or TBI, because these are all essentially conditions of oxidative stress. Um, and then, like, to unpack the excitotoxicity, this is like where you have overstimulation of neurotransmitters, especially glutamate. And basically what happens is this leads to an excessive firing of neurons, and it's like a machine gun. You're firing it so much that it overheats and, well, this is an exaggeration, but like melts, or in this case it would be cell death. And glutamate, it's not all bad. It's your excitatory neurotransmitter, so um, it makes the neurons want to be more likely to fire. And under normal conditions, it's even essential for things like learning and memory, so that's a really good thing. But if you get too much, the neurons become overexcited, and then you get this big influx of calcium into the neurons. And this excess calcium inside the neurons is toxic because it activates enzymes that are going to break down cell structures. And that's where we get that term, the excitotoxicity. Excited, bouncing around, and toxicity, breaking it down. So when we think about like cortexin's role in that, it modulates modulates by mitigating the release of that glutamate, and it's kind of like having your hand on a volume dial. So it's, if you need a little bit more glutamate, it's going to let it out, or if it's like starting to ramp up too much, you can kind of turn that volume down. And by doing that, that helps to balance GABA, which is going to be an inhibitory neurotransmitter, with that glutamate, which is going to be the exciting, firing on all cylinders neurotransmitter. And to give you some specific context, so this might tie it together even a little bit better, when we think about something like epilepsy, basically what's happening is there's too much neuronal excitation. So when you take something like a cortexin, in the case of epilepsy, it's going to boost GABA's inhibitory effects. So it kind of amplifies those and can have a role in preventing seizures. Or when we think about cognitive decline, that might be too little excitation coming from the glutamate. So it's almost like, telling your brain, hey, it's time to memorize something. And it's like, hey, it's Sunday, I'm sleeping in. And cortexin's going to help optimize that glutamate function so that you do get a little bit more excitation and help on that front. And when we think about like on a molecular level, what's cortexin doing? The pathways it's going to interact with, it's MAPK-ERK pathway for those of you like me that like to nerd out on this stuff. And basically that pathway, I won't quiz anybody on these letters. It's just a real important one for cell survival and differentiation and synaptic plasticity. And it's one of the pathways also that kind of helps protect neurons from apoptosis and promotes like growth and repair. And then we've also got like the PI3K AKT pathway, and that one's going to be more of a pathway that's going to promote survival, growth. It's involved in like anti-apoptotic, like the cell death mechanism, and also plays a crucial role in like the brain plasticity. So kind of wrap it up and everything, when we think about it, and why we would use a cortexin, it's really going to be fantastic for any type of oxidative stress, excitotoxicity, but works through, if that glutamate's too high, it turns the GABA up basically higher. So it kind of balances out the neurotransmitters. And I won't quiz anybody on the pathways because I'm probably the only nerd that really likes to memorize those.
So yeah, there's, based on those applications, it'd be somebody that's not getting enough sleep, not getting enough, greens and fruits and, antioxidants, and probably under a high level of stress with a high level of like input stimulus into their life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point too about, sometimes when we think about all these things that can reduce oxidative stress, Chris made a great point, get your green vegetables in.
Yeah, number one, right? Like you don't need modafinil if you're getting adequate sleep. If you don't need, like, there's a lot of approaches, and that's we don't want to replace and go, well, we can have bad habits because we're using X. That way I can get away with sleeping less. That is the wrong approach, right?
Yeah.
We want to think about this as an optimization strategy. So I'm going to skip adding any more input because we are starting to run pretty long here. But FGL loop peptide, you want to roll into that one, and then maybe I can do a little on C Max and Celnac.
Sounds great. So the FGL loop peptide, it's basically just a synthetic peptide, and it's derived from a naturally occurring protein in the brain. It's called NCAM, almost like a NCAA, but it's NCAM. So that's just neural cell adhesion molecule, and it's gained a lot of attention due to its potential neuroprotective benefits, neurotrophic benefits, and nootropic properties. So you remember earlier, Chris differentiated between like nootropic and neurotrophic. It's particularly beneficial in terms of enhancing memory. It also protects neurons, and it can. They're looking at it for treating things like Alzheimer's, stroke, traumatic brain injury. It's derived from a specific portion of that NCAM molecule, and it's an important protein involved in neuron-to-neuron interaction. So when these little neurons are talking to themselves, these little essentially driving all the processes in our body, what's happening is it's creating this synaptic plasticity and brain development. And specifically, the FGL peptide is going to come from the part of that NCAM. It's called fibronectin type 3 homologous loop. So that's why it got that FGL loop peptide name from. And when we think about how it works in the brain, its main target is there's what's called a FGFR1, which is fibroblast growth factor receptor 1. And it's a receptor that's involved in all these different cellular processes, including like cell growth, differentiation, survival. And it's a key player in the brain for development and neuronal survival. So what it does is it comes over and it binds to this FGFR1, and it's on the surface of the neurons, and that triggers this whole cascade of intracellular events. And this binding activates signaling pathways that promote neuronal survival, growth, repair. And then for the neurotrophic effects, it activates this FGFR1. It mimics the neurotrophic factors like, as we said, the Cerebralysin does, the NGF and the BDNF. And those are critical for maintaining healthy neurons and promoting like growth of new synaptic connections. And it also induces synaptic plasticity. It enhances the LTP, the long-term potentiation in the hippocampus. And the hippocampus, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with, in the 70s, there was that guy that had the surgery done and lost a significant portion of his memory. Like, he'd eat breakfast and he wouldn't remember that, but he was still able to function some way because of essentially his hippocampus was in place. They took out, I think it was part of the prefrontal cortex, and the hippocampus is like almost like your reflex or like your long-term memory, things that become a habit. So when he wandered out of the house and everybody was like, "Oh man, where is he? This is bad." He actually found his way back home, And when they asked where he was, he didn't remember. But then when they asked, where'd you go? He'd be like, well, I just walked up to the blue house and I turned left and I walked to the red house and that way. So that's hippocampus, to give it a little context.
Nice.
And then for the neuroprotection, that's coming through the anti-apoptotic effect. So again, those pathways that I won't quiz anybody on, those basically just reduce the apoptosis, the programmed cell death, and it also reduces neuroinflammation. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. In terms of like how's it delivered, it's available as a nasal spray. And when we think again about pharmacokinetics and where the brain's at and where the nose is at, really makes sense why this is a great go-to, especially if you need to do something to boost memory and recall.
Yep. All right. Well, I'll dive into C Max and Celnac, and Anthony will probably jump in with more of the science explanation as it. I'll lean on him for that. Both of these are also nasal or injectable. I've used them as both ways. I think the only difference really is it's a little bit cheaper on the injectable, and nasal is definitely a little nasal spray. Well, actually, this one's NewPEPT from Amino. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it is usually a more acceptable to most people. So starting with C Max, it is an adrenocorticotropic hormone. Not too particular about that, except we'll talk into it in a little bit, but it is one that it is a very powerful neurotrophic peptide working through brain-derived neurotrophic factor as well. So it's very powerful in that realm. It makes it really versatile for both cognitive enhancement, neuroprotection, but also has some really interesting properties as it relates to things like ADHD and stress. So obviously, the BDNF we've talked about, that's going to help with the neural survivor, synaptic plasticity. So we're going to start seeing, all the effects around focus, memory, some of the stress resistance, stroke and recovery, impacting cognitive decline, because we're going to have things of the neuroprotection. But what's unique about this is the regulation of neurotransmitters. So C-Max modulates the levels of several key neurotransmitters, including dopamine, serotonin, and acetylcholine. So those are critical for focus on mood regulation and cognitive processing. And by increasing dopamine levels, C-Max helps enhance motivation, focus, and mental clarity. So we've got some different pathways there. And then I missed the adrenocorticotropin, but C-Max has been shown to regulate the brain's stress response by affecting the production of the corticotropin releasing hormone, that's CRH, which is involved in the body's response to stress. It helps reduce the negative impact of stress on cognitive performance, making it easier to maintain focus and clarity in high pressure situations. So I think that's pretty important. It's involved in around stimulating the adrenal glands and cortisol and other stress related hormones. And if we're muting those effects, we're going to have less of the negative effects from the overstimulation from stress, improving a brain function. And as a whole, you're going to see a reduction in some of the oxidative stress and things that we've talked about, those others having an impact on. So several different pathways to boost focus and concentration, improving memory and learning. And that's both short-term and long-term memory, because it's having an effect on those short-term pathways, again, through the neurotransmitters, like a nootropic would. But because of the synaptic plasticity, we're having an impact on the neurotrophic, or the growth of those new neurons and pathways. Combine that with anti-stress effects, you can start seeing something that's really powerful. Lots of potential for traumatic brain injuries, neurodegenerative things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It has been increasingly explored for attention deficit disorder. So its ability to increase dopamine levels improves focus, making it a potential alternative to traditional stimulant medications like Adderall or Ritalin, which definitely have some side effects with them. So offering something that is also a cognitive enhancement at the same time, and reducing those effects of the overstimulation that I talked about earlier, that's going to be a big impact on the ADHD with not having that overstimulation and stress response effect. So we can see why it's being looked at for ADHD. You're going to see a lot of the other same things, except one of the notes around the neurotransmitters is also going to play a role in mood. So it's going to have an impact on mood disorders, particularly anxiety, stress related. Anything that you'd like to add on C Max?
I think that's terrific. The one thing that's kind of cool about it is it's got a vasodilatory effect. So if somebody's got like sleep apnea where you're not getting oxygen to the brain, there can be a lot of value there. The with the BDNF too, it's really interesting. We've had these antidepressants around forever, but how many people do you know that have been cured from taking them? And in fact, when they study these people that have depression, it seems like 100% of them have low levels of BDNF. So what research is starting to gravitate towards is that perhaps just kind of getting up that level of BDNF is something that makes us more capable of dealing with stress and our response to stress. And maybe that's kind of the future of what we do for treating depression. The other really cool thing or benefit with the C Max is its effect on inflammatory cytokines, specifically in the brain. So in terms of our immune modulation, Cmax is something that's going to help modulate the brain's immune response. And that's kind of where some of that reducing the neuroinflammation comes from.
Yeah, and it's a great segue into Celnac, which is really a dual action. It's an anxiolytic and nootropic peptide. It has a really big impact on calm, focus, and cognitive clarity, but it's specifically derived from an immune molecule, Duffin. So it plays a big role in immune regulation, and that's a lot of the mechanisms of action are through that. It's affects also the immune function, but also directly relates to the nervous system and regulate neurotransmitter levels. So it primarily operates through GABA and serotonin levels. Now it does have influence dopamine, but the primary is the GABA and serotonin inhibiting GABA, and GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter that calms the brain and reduces anxiety. So while it's associated with mood regulation, by modulating these neurotransmitters, Celnac helps promote relaxation, but it doesn't cause drowsiness. Again, so it's not working in that fashion. It does influence dopamine and norepinephrine levels, which are critical for the motivation, as we talked about, alertness, focus, by maintaining a balance of the calming between the GABA as well. And then activating dopamine helps produce calm focus, particularly in stressful situations. And then, being off of an immune modulating compound, it's obviously going to have support immune functions by promoting immune balance and reducing inflammation in the brain. So this modulation may contribute to its neuroprotective properties, helping maintain healthy brain function under stress. So yeah, those are the primary focuses of why someone would want to use this: reducing anxiety without sedation, then still having some of the same effects on the nootropic effects on memory and learning and mental clarity, and then the reduced stress, cognitive decline. So really great compound. Typically, it would be if one's wanting more of the stress relief and anxiety functions. I think that the lean would be towards the Celnac over the C Max. Would you agree with that, Anthony?
Yeah, I think it's great for modulating that GABA. And then the other kind of unique thing about it, and this ties into that stress response, is it increases the activity of the enkephalons, and those are uh, trying to think of how to explain these. So it reduces the perception of strength and anxiety. And when we think about enkephalons, those are like traditional opioid drugs or whatever, but these are the ones that your body kind of naturally makes. So and that's why one of the reasons why you can use it during the day, because it's not going to uh, cause like sedation or addiction. It's a much safer alternative for stress and anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to dive into Synapsin RG3, that ginseng derivative?
Sure. Yeah. So the synapsin it's a compound derived from ginsenoside, which comes from ginseng, and it's ginsenoside RG3. There's RG1, RG2, RG3. The three is the one that's really kind of studied, although there's some more stuff coming about the RG2 I've been reading with regards to insulin sensitivity. But the ginsenosides, what they are is they're active compounds in ginseng, and they're responsible for a lot of the medicinal benefits that you're going to see. And the RG3 is one of the more bioactive and well-studied ginsenosides. It's been linked to this huge range of benefits, and that includes things like neuroprotection, cognitive enhancement, anti-aging. Um, and when we think about like what it is, it's a traditional medicinal plant. It's been used in Asia for centuries, and there's different types of these ginsenosides. There's actually 30 of them that have been identified, and I'm sure they'll find more. And they've studied them for things like neuroprotection, reducing inflammation, anti-cancer, anti-fatigue, and the RG3 in particular. It's a damarine type tripene sapoin, and it's a jumbled up way of saying it naturally occurs. It's a naturally occurring molecule with a sugar chain that's going to be attached to it, and it's a multi-ring complex. When we think about like the RG3, what's particularly interesting about it is it can modulate various cellular pathways important for brain health, immune health, and anti-aging. And in terms of like the neurotransmitter modulation, it works on that cholinergic system that we referenced in our podcast about nicotine, and it increases acetylcholine, and that's going to be things like your short-term memory and learning, as well as the first thing that's released from the prefrontal cortex into the neuromuscular junction to initiate like a muscle contraction. And acetylcholine is also the primary transmitter or neurotransmitter of the parasympathetic nervous system. So, when we talk about like a balance between your sympathetic nervous system, like fight and flight, parasympathetic, rest and digest, and we see that getting really dysregulated, one of the things that happens is those acetylcholine levels just drop and drop and drop. And that's also like, when people talk about overtraining or like they see their strength going down, now it starts to make sense, because think about it. Like, we've got low acetylcholine and our body's trying to use it for all these different processes, including muscle contraction. So we see that drop in performance. Just kind of an interesting side note there, I guess. It also works in the dopaminergic system, so it modulates dopamine levels. Remember, when we say modulate, that means it doesn't increase them, so you don't have to worry about like a receptor burning out or something like that. It modulates them, so if you need a little bit more, turns the dial up, or if you got enough, it can turn that dial down. And it also works in the serotonergic system, where it influences serotonin levels, and that's going to help regulate things like mood, anxiety, emotional well-being. And it works in that this is the one that always trips me up, glutamatergic system, and that's a glutamate system. And remember, we talked a little bit earlier about when that glutamate gets too high, it causes the excitotoxicity, but we need to have glutamate so that we can learn and have memories and things like that. It does increase production of BDNF, like a lot of these do. and it's got anti-inflammatory properties in the brain. It specifically reduces things like tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6. And it also suppresses the NF-κB pathway, which is a potential target for things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even depression. It's also got antioxidant effects, and it's pretty all around amazing compound. I generally like to. It comes in. You can get like the liposomal tabs where you chew them up. I absolutely love those. Metabolic Nutrition or Metabolic Elite is the company that I order those from. And with a liposomal delivery, you're going to get almost the same, potentially even better delivery than like if you do the nasal spray. It comes as a nasal spray, and they can even compound it with things that would support it. Like I've had it compounded with alpha GPC, and had it compounded with things like low dose leucine, and all sorts of cool combos you can get into. But yeah, I think that whether your goals are training or whether you want to do something to support recovery of the nervous system, or whether you're trying to improve your learning, this is a real easy addition. And if you go with something like those lipo tabs that I use, you can carry those with you, and it's not awkward. Like you don't have to worry about like getting too hot or anything like that. So great compound.
Should I haven't tried that, Anthony. Should I give that a try?
I would 100% say so. Yeah, the Synapsin LPT is the one that I use from Metabolic Elite, and it's been fantastic. For me, I think probably my timing of it, I do it first thing in the morning when I wake up, and then right after a workout, because the nervous system kind of took that hit. And I've even taken it close to bed, no disruption in sleep or anything, but I generally do morning and then kind of early afternoon, and think it's tremendous.
All right. Well, I'll jump into to NewPEPT. I've got the Amino Asylum nasal spray version. By the way, you can use code Duffin20 for 20% off Amino Asylum, or somebody else's, whatever. So NewPEPT is the most powerful in the Racetam family, and it works by stimulating both the BDNF and nerve growth factors. So I don't think I'm going to beat up like all the impacts that it would have, but that's, mechanisms of action, regulating the production of those two is going to have a big impact on synaptic plasticity, neural connections. It also modulates glutamate activity. Does neuroprotection, and it's antioxidant and an anti-inflammatory properties. So, like I said, this is a very powerful and potent synthetic nootropic. And so with the glutamate activity, it plays a key role in memory formation and learning. So glutamate is the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter, and by enhancing that activity, it helps promote improve cognitive processing and speed and efficiency. With the neuroprotective effects, it helps shield the brain from the oxidative stress, as we've talked about, and then the antioxidants, freeing those clear radicals, is going to help with neurodegeneration and anti-inflammatory properties. So output of that, all the usual: improving learning, focus, mental clarity, the neuroprotection effects, and then it does have an impact on reducing anxiety and improving mood as well. It's a subtle anxiolytic, thanks to the modulation of dopamine and serotonin levels. Not as powerful as what we talked about before, but those neurotransmitters are there. Because of this, NewPEPT is a really great product to stack with a lot of other products. So you can pair it with choline sources like alpha GPC to support acetylcholine levels for enhancing memory. You could also put it with other racetams like piracetam for synergistic effects on learning and memory. And that's similar effects on cognitive decline, performance enhancement, post-brain injury, and recovery. So again, NewPEPT is a potent and versatile nootropic that offers a range of benefits. I think that's what makes it really cool. From memory enhancement, learning and focus, and neuroprotection. Its ability to stimulate BDNF and NGF, along with the glutamate modulation and neuroprotective properties, make it a powerful tool for both cognitive enhancement and long-term brain health. That's why I've got it here, because again, it's not just a nootropic, it is a neurotrophic as well. Whether used in you can use it really well with neurotropic stacks or as a standalone supplement. So it works either way. NewPEPT remains one of the most popular choices among individuals seeking to optimize cognitive function and protecting against cognitive decline, recovering from brain injuries. It's effective, combined with its relatively low dose that make it an essential part. So dosing is typically going to be between 10 to 30 milligrams per day, but usually on the lower end of that. 10 is usually pretty adequate, and that can be dosed from 1 to 3 times a day. Little bottle here is 500 milligrams, so at 10 per day, it's going to last 3 times a day, up to 3 times a day. It's going to last for a little time. I did run through that pretty quickly, Anthony, so if you want to flush that out in any manner.
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview.
I just want to make sure people, because I went through it fast, but it's a lot of the same information. People don't underestimate the value of this one over ones that we may have spent more time on.
Yeah, with racetams in general, those are going to be things, as Chris pointed out, neuromodulation is going to be the primary mechanism of action, and biggest effects you're going to see in terms of neuromodulators are going to be on acetylcholine and glutamate. So kind of reflecting on what we previously talked about, where, after those acetylcholine levels start going down, we see dips in short-term memory, feel like we're overtraining. When we have something that modulates acetylcholine, it can kind of bring it back up to where it needs to be without disrupting the balance of other things.
Yeah.
And there is definitely going to be a lot of synergy if you can combine a NewPEPT with, and that's what I do. I take a NewPEPT with a alpha GPC or the cytocholine or even like a choline bitartrate. And that one's going to be a little bit less bioavailable. It also pairs well with, you could do it like theanine in there to kind of help on that aspect. And then, of course, things like acetyl L-carnitine. And
that was one of the things I did with this is I took the stimulant version of the Vasoblitz that I always pimp on everyone. No need to pimp that on this one. But this is the cognitive piece of it. So we've got, so I take the Vasoblitz formula, and then on training days, we've got, L-citrulline, beta-alanine, the usual in there. But it got DMAE and then Rhodiola rosea for some of those stress properties, being an adaptogen, but then also a pretty significant dose of L-theanine along with caffeine as well. But really like the L-theanine's effect with a lot of, nootropic compounds. It really modulates them out quite a bit.
It's such a well thought out formula that you have too. And I'm not just saying that because I support you, obviously, but when you think about like all the different adaptogens out there, the intelligence of you and your company to put in the rhodiola instead of some of the other ones, because rhodiola is one that if your energy is low, that's going to be your go-to adaptogen compared to there's versatility with them, but like an ashwagandha that a lot of people just throw kind of wherever. To me, that's more of a nighttime one and more of a repairing one versus like I need more energy in the morning.
Yeah.
And I just love it because everything in the formula just makes sense to me.
Let's talk about maximizing your strength and resilience. When chasing my 1,000-pound squat, I made my own supplements out of necessity to help push my body to its physical limits. So I founded Build Fast Formula because I needed supplements that actually worked every time I trained. All our formulas are backed by peer-reviewed research and third-party informed sport tested for quality and safety. Listeners can get 10% off by using code RESILIENCE at buildfastformula.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off everything at buildfastformula.com. Find your formula and feel your physicality today.
Yeah, no, it's anybody that uses it usually doesn't go away because there's really call it full blitz. There's really nothing better. It is a fairly expensive compared to, a lot of people make those pre-workouts, that are $20 or $30, and it's not one of those. But that one actually stacks with a lot of products. That's the same formula. It's in Vasoblitz, but it's going to enhance anabolism. It's going to enhance recovery. It's actually not just, going to be something that amps you up for a workout, but is actually building and repairing. And then tried to do that with some of the, stimulant focus as we're moving into that and make a nice, no crash, long lasting feel.
Yeah.
I think actually that's a pretty decent. I didn't plan on plugging anything in this podcast, but, right here in the Racetam family, and we still have Piracetam, which was it's the original. So I think it's worth going through that, being the original nootropic for cognitive enhancement. So you want to dive into that one?
Sure. Did you want to cover the Dihexa still? Or
I missed the Dihexa. You want to hit both of those then?
Yeah, happy to. With the Dihexa, I really like that one. It's got some kind of unique properties to it. It one of its targets is the hepatocyte growth factor.
I missed a couple on our list. We got Dihexa and DHH-B.
Oh yeah,
I mixed both of those.
Dihydrohonokiol. Yeah, that's
well, let's cover the Piracetam since we just covered NewPEPT and they're both in the same family. Does that make sense? And then cover Dihexa. And I don't know how I missed those. Okay.
It's a Thursday that feels like a Monday, so
it does.
Totally understandable. With the racetams, we talked a little bit about kind of what neurotransmitters they target, that being the glutamate and like acetylcholine. Piracetam specifically, it's a synthetic compound in that family, and structurally, like if you were to look at it structurally, it's really similar actually to GABA. Gamma aminobutyric acid. And that's when we think about GABA, that's kind of the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. But it doesn't directly affect GABA receptors. Instead, the way that it works is it influences the neurotransmitter system, neuroplasticity, and like cerebral blood flow. And Piracetam, you can use it for like cognitive function, boosting memory, learning. Some countries actually prescribe it for things like dementia, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline. On a molecular level, when we think about how it works, it's really pretty simple. It basically increases cerebral blood flow, and with stimulant drugs, that's not really kind of how they work. It doesn't directly activate or suppress brain activity. Instead, it basically just optimizes that communication between neurons, and it modulates like the glutamate, the acetylcholine, and the dopamine, which are three of your, I don't know if I'd say they're all excitatory, but more like, dopamine's kind of your drive to do things, motivation, reward, attention, acetylcholine, learning, attention, and then the glutamate, Piracetam, the way that it works with the glutamate, it increases the sensitivity of AMPA and NMDA receptors. And those are involved in synaptic plasticity and long-term potentiation process, which essentially that's a process where synaptic connections between neurons are strengthened during learning, and enhancement of glutamate activity, improving like memory formation and learning speed. So I guess kind of when we think about, where might this have some utility, It's really good for with that cerebral blood flow. Like if there's any sort of ischemic events, it's going to accelerate learning, and it's going to help with like prevent neurodegeneration, and it sensitizes those receptors for the glutamate to work with. So when we think about like why somebody might have a good reaction to this or why somebody might have a bad reaction to this, let's think about what we learned about glutamate so far, that we need it for like learning and that kind of thing. So if we've got a really sensitive receptor, terrific, it's going to attach to that receptor and we're going to get that learning going. But if we've got excitotoxicity where there's too much of that glutamine going around, so somebody's really hyper, and then you throw something in like this, it's actually going to sensitize those receptors even more, then, those receptors are going to be overstimulated, and that would probably amplify the excitotoxicity or perhaps lead to like receptor burnout. So that would be a situation where I'd probably be like, not the best tool for the job.
All right. Want to move on to the next two?
Sure. Did you want to, for the next two, go over the Dihexa and dihydrohinochial, or?
Yep, those are the last two, and then I could probably do Modafinil, and then we'll wrap it up.
That sounds great. So Dihexa is really one of my favorites. Never met a peptide I didn't like, but it's definitely up there for my favorites. And when we think about like its key action in the brain, it works on that hepatocyte growth factor MET pathway, and that's going to be kind of at the core of like its neurogenic and synaptogenic effects. Neurogenic meaning growth of nerves, synaptogenic, growth of synapses. And what it does is it binds to this, it's called the C Met receptor, and it triggers this whole cascade of molecule signals. And those lead to the cell growth and survival and repair, and particularly in the brain. And with the synapse formation, it activates that C Met receptor, and it boosts the formation of synapses between neurons. And that's really essential for learning, that these synapses, where the connections made, the more of these synapses we have, that's kind of where that little signal transmits through, and that's what allows us to learn things, and that affects the rate that we can process things at. So it's kind of funny. Side story. I was at one of the A4M conferences, and they had this device you put on your brain, and it measures like how different parts of your brain are working and everything. And for most of this stuff, it was pretty average, above average. But when they got to processing speed, the normal range is like, I think it was up to 90, and he measured mine, and it was just 324. And I had taken Dihexa that morning, but he was like, I haven't seen a score like this before. He's like, it probably moved around because you don't have a lot of hair on your head, and it didn't move around. I'm not saying I'm the smartest person out there, but just to speak to like how effective Dihexa is, and that kind of solidified it for me, being able to see something that measures brain activity and how much higher my processing speed was. I was like, yeah, probably keep taking that. I like to learn and like to be able to process things fast. The other things it helps with, like a lot of these neurogenesis, neuroinflammation, and where they've studied it, Alzheimer's, dementia, and because of its ability to repair these synapses so effectively, at least in the animal models, the Dihexa has really improved the synaptic density and cognitive performance. And there's a lot of hope for Alzheimer's space. Although, side note, this will probably be a whole nother podcast, but one of the new targets they found for Alzheimer's, and this one really seems to make sense to me, it's called galectin-3. And what galectin-3 does is it takes like these tau tangles and stuff, and almost makes like this ball, and it bounces around, and then it gets jammed in between the synapses, so it prevents that conductivity that would allow us to like have memory and everything. So I think, it's important to form new synapses, because then if like, this one's got this, because of the galectin-3, it's got this ball stuff in there. At least it's kind of like if you have a freeway and you have to take a detour. But what would be even better is if you didn't have to take the detour in the first place. So that's why that galectin-3 has kind of become a target. And again, not to diverge too much, but a really simple way to bring down those galectin-3 levels is modified citrus pectin, and or you can eat apple skins. It's a great source of citrus pectin. So I guess I got kind of off subject there. My apologies.
Your audio is a little bit funky right now too.
Oops, sorry about that.
There's better.
Yeah, my connection's been a little weird in here today. Apologize for that. But yeah, the long story short, Dihexa is really excellent. And when you're thinking about it, just think about it in terms of increasing processing speed and increasing the recovery for your brain, rebuilding those networks.
All right. Should I jump into modafinil?
Sure.
Or did you get both? Yeah. We good?
Yeah, you could do the modafinil, and I can wrap up with DHHB or.
No, yeah, let's hit DHHB, and then I'll. Well, yeah, I'll do modafinil, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. So, modafinil, super powerful agent for wakefulness and cognitive enhancement. So it was primarily brought about for disorders like narcolepsy and sleep apnea, but the off-label use has really kind of skyrocketed as it relates to cognitive performance, boosting focus, and reducing fatigue. And it does so without like these jittery side effects like our traditional caffeine and amphetamines. So it's become really popular for the biohackers and students and folks like that. I've used it for a number of years. I haven't used it for probably about a year or so now. Now, I will say, as I dive into the mechanisms of action, that honestly, from my understanding, is a lot of how it actually works isn't fully understood at these periods at this point. And some of the properties are believed to be because of the significant antioxidant properties. And I mentioned this in the prior podcast. That it is clearing those, that's what our sleep typically does, is clear those antioxidants. And so that's why we're getting such a boost from that, or replacement of the sleep process. But I want to warn people, don't take this to replace poor sleep habits and not getting sleep, okay? And number one. But as a wakefulness promoting cognitive product, it's primarily linked through its influence on dopamine and orexin systems. And we haven't talked about orexin as yet, but we will here in a little bit. But it is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So it works by inhibiting the reuptake of dopamine, which leads to increased levels of dopamine in the brain, which is crucial for motivation, reward processing, and focus. And by preventing that reabsorption, it boosts alertness and enhances cognitive functioning, particularly in tasks that require sustained attention and concentration, which again is why you see it with students and those that really need to stay focused. Now, the activation of the orexin neurons. Modafinil also activates these pathways in the hypothalamus. Orexin, also known as hypocretin, is a neurotransmitter that regulates wakefulness, arousal, and appetite. By stimulating orexin, modafinil helps maintain that wakefulness, alertness, making it highly effective in promoting long-lasting focus without intense spikes or crashes associated with traditional stimulants, which is what I like. Now, I have suffered with some minor narcolepsy most of my life. I'm not taking it currently because I am so engaged in the stuff that I do. It keeps me focused, but if I don't, I used to fall asleep at my desk or have to pull over on the side of the road for a quickie. I'd fall asleep anywhere, anytime, as soon as I lose my excitement for stuff. Modafinil also increases glutamate, so the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter, plays a critical role in learning and memory. At the same time, reduces GABA's activity, which is responsible for the inhibitory signal around sleepiness. This dual action helps maintain that wakefulness while supporting cognitive function, making it a potent tool for improving mental performance during extended periods of work. So this is something I would recommend using when you need it and not on a regular basis, or, for several days a week and then a few days off. Although I do know people that use it year round, and there does not seem to be any. What's interesting is there's no really tolerance buildup or negative when you quit using it. So I'd used it for years, ran out, didn't reorder, and literally you don't have a drop off like you do with a number of other things. So largely, its benefits are centered around increasing mental clarity, focus, and wakefulness. Tremendous, cognitive enhancer for people who want to maintain a high level of productivity for long periods of time. Reduces fatigue and promotes that wakefulness. Minimal side effects compared to traditional stimulants. So, we could probably do a whole podcast on it itself, but it's got a wide level of applications, which you're going to see from people like the two of us. Although, do you use Modafinil at all, or have used it, Anthony?
Oh, yeah. I'm one of those daily users.
Okay.
And what I'll do, I've never had to raise the dose, so I think that speaks to you not really developing the tolerance to it.
I used it for 6 years and never raised the dose. There's no needing to do that. And I used it every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we mentioned previously in the nicotine podcast, I'll pair the nicotine with it to kind of recharge it. And there's a lot of synergy between those two. But yeah, I think it's terrific. It's a great compound, and I've had great results with it. I've got just enough sleep apnea that I don't need one of the Darth Vader masks, but at the same time, not optimal oxygen to the brain. So I take it primarily both to promote the wakefulness, but then also to reduce that oxidative stress that would accumulate in the brain from the sleep apnea.
Yep. So, people want to maintain high productivity levels, academic performance, great use for shift workers and people with sleep disorders, like we talked about. So Anthony's got one. I've got a slightly different issue, no apnea on my side. And then just fatigue management and high stress jobs. So this is not a neurotrophic compound like many of our other peptides that we talked about. This is a short-term cognitive boost. Although if you are someone that is suffering with sleep, you're going to have longer-term cognitive issues. So you could think about it as mitigating those deficits as it relates. So, but yeah, if you're looking for the neurotrophic, go with those peptides for the long-term benefits like NewPEPT, C Max, Cerebralysin, many of the others that we talked about. Yeah, I think that wraps up.
I guess that brings us to the DHHB, the dihydrohinochial B.
Yep.
And that one, it comes from magnolia bark, and really good for anti-anxiety and calming effects. And so to explain it, if I were to return to my analogy of our brain being this busy city, DHHB would be a traffic controller for brain signals. And it's constantly driving around these locations. Some areas in the city, like anxiety or stress centers, are going to get overcrowded and have too much traffic signals, and that'd cause traffic jams in your brain. And this leads to when you get those traffic jams, that's kind of where you get some buildup of anxiety and stress, or just that feeling of overwhelmed. And the DHHB is really cool because, like a traffic controller in the brain, it's going to reduce the traffic to these areas and kind of slow down, let the brain play kind of catch up and redirect some of those cars. And it allows everything to move smoothly and calmly again. And the way that it does this, with that GABA receptor, it trying to think how to explain this. So GABA would be kind of like a speed limit sign in the brain, using our city analogy, and telling the signals to slow down, and kind of prevents that overactivity. And DHHB can boost GABA so the brain signals don't race too fast. And it also reinforces the speed limit signs, which is going to help ensure you just got this nice, calm, steady flow of traffic signals, and you don't get that traffic jam that, just like in real life, causes stress and anxiety. And the other thing it does is brain has signals that make you alert, like when we talked about the glutamate, and it being an excitatory neurotransmitter. And when you have too much, we talked about what happens. It's kind of like the fast lanes of traffic. And DHHB kind of closes off those lanes. So it's almost like it kind of blocks that glutamate from, building up to those excitotoxic levels we talked about. And it's got some neuroprotective benefits too. So it's almost like a coolant system in your car if you get backed up in that traffic and things are starting to build up. The nice thing about it too, a lot of times people take it before they go to sleep, like hour before you go to sleep. You could take it during the day, because since it's working through modulation, and it's really just kind of ensuring that things are, not getting too jumbled up. It's going to be, it's not going to make you sleepy or that kind of thing. But at the night, in the evening, when you want to fall asleep, it's going to have some benefit, and it modulates the GABA receptors, whereas something like a benzodiazepine is going to work a little bit differently. It's going to be more of a direct signal, and that's why you get kind of that grogginess or like next day hangover with some of the benzodiazepines, and you also get some of the negative long-term effects, whereas this one is just doing more of a modulation, so you don't have to worry about that. And that's kind of the rundown on the DHHB. I could go into a little bit more about the subtype of GABA receptor, but might be excessive for the purposes of the discussion.
Yeah, I think we're an hour and a half in right now, so
Yeah.
Let's. I think it's time to close out. I hope that we did a great, a decent job of explaining the differences between nootropics and neurotrophics, and how those relate to the role in cognitive enhancement, as well as promoting long-term brain health by modulating those pathways involved with memory, learning, and neuroprotection. Cognitive peptides, I hope that we went through and you've got a basic understanding of many of those, like C Max, Cerebralysin, Dihexa, how you can boost your mental clarity and focus on some part of the brain's natural ability to grow and repair and protect neurons. And the difference between those and traditional nootropics like the racetams and modafinil that provide immediate cognitive enhancement by enhancing neurotransmitter activity. The peptides as a whole take a more holistic approach, and we're both influencing neuroplasticity, promoting synaptogenesis, and stimulating neurotrophic factors like BDNF and NGF, contributing to long-term improvements in cognitive function, recovery from neurological damage. So if you've got an interest in, biohacking, cognitive enhancement, neurodegenerative treatments, I think that we've covered a pretty good spectrum of how to approach that.
Yeah, I love with these compounds, you got delivery options ranging from intravenous to sub-Q to intranasal to capsule, tablet. So there's no real barrier of entry. And as we were going through them, I think it probably is apparent that there's overlap with a lot of them, but they each kind of have their area they shine in. So it's cool to think when you're putting together a protocol to maximize your brain function and everything, based on the specifics of the situation, there's one that's probably going to be best, and as a different situation comes up, you can rotate those. But yeah, they're a big part of. I absolutely love learning, and if I won the lottery, I'd just go around and go to conferences all year, as long as I could bring my dog, cat, and fiance with me. And these are something that really makes it possible to take in a lot of information, supports processing it effectively, and just terrific compounds. I think, as Chris pointed out earlier, and this is probably the most important thing, for as amazing as these are, like, nothing takes the place of sleep and hydration. So you got to get those two boxes checked. But if you're doing those and you add these on top, you're really going to see benefit.
Yep. We have a ton more information on the Endless Evolution community. It's free to join, and then a small fee to access a massive amount of content as it relates to peptides, training, movement, courses on a million different things, from courses on sleep, courses on peptides, courses on nutrition, courses on hydration, you name it. Really in-depth, a number of PhD level courses as well. So check that out. And if you also need some guidance on particular protocols and things yourself, you can, ask in the community or reach out to Anthony or myself personally on there. So yeah, support, love your support with that, and supporting our sponsors with this episode, Merrick Health.